Peace and blessings, family. Welcome back to the channel. I pray that you all are doing well. Welcome to all of the new listeners. Thanks for joining us for this live session. I just have one question. Do you all think people finally get it that this two-party system caters to the elite? Do you think they finally get this? I mean, it's so in your face. It's almost like this shouldn't be too hard to figure out at this point, but I don't know. They may still not get it. So, welcome to all of you. How you doing, Brother Byron? All of the moderators, peace and blessings to you. Joy. Well, yes, Joy. Bithia, how are you? Let's see. Diana. All right. Let's see who else we have. Uh, Baruka Yah. Okay, Sharonda Johnson, Pat, Shaya, Kenneth. Peace and blessings to all of you. Valise here. Lizette, Glenn, how are you doing? Golden Leopard 97, Lady Virtue, how you all doing? Thea Pal, how you doing, Sister Alma? Saw, Cody, how you doing? Tassian Bolton. Let's see. Council's Girl, Takar, Stephanie, Crystal, Dorothy, Sister Cece, how are you? Franny, Mega Old School, Mr. Mega Old School. Dennis, how are you? Seed of Jake, son of Zion. Let's see. We have Dwayne Burton, Inya's Grip. I know that's right. You won. Carla, Michael, Pat Yah. All right, raw and spicy Jamaican. Ooh, Michael McTavish, how you doing? Carmen, Craig, Miss Love, Renaya or Renaya. Anonymous, how you doing? Let's see. Basaba Yahoo, Miss Love, Yakur. All right, it's a lot of you rolling on in. Well, welcome to all of you, family, and to all of you watching by television, family members. Thank you for joining me for another session. So, you all, yeah, we still need to talk about some things regarding these maps. I'm telling you, I'm so surprised by the things that I'm uncovering. Some of this stuff is like, okay, wait a minute now. So, yeah, there are some things to see on these maps. But before we get started, just a few updates. Some of you may remember the video Judah's Bitter Cup. It's time to pass the bitter cup. This was uploaded back in 2021. Well, it was taken down. So it's no longer on the channel, but it has been uploaded to Hebrew Connect TV. For those who have not seen it, the raw file, you'll be able to see it there. I believe it was one of the most shared videos on the channel, but apparently it violated community guidelines after 4 years. But we won't dwell on that now, will we? But anyway, if you have not seen it, check out Hebrew Connect TV. And it's a good time to say that I highly, highly, highly recommend taking good notes or using a software that will allow you to save the videos that you feel are most important to you. Save it as an MP3 or a 4. The other thing is I have been getting so many messages from folks saying that they were unsubscribed or that they're not getting notifications. Again, the only thing that I can tell you is to try unsubscribing and resubscribing again. Another option is to make sure you're on our email list, because we do send out notifications when videos are uploaded for that reason. We know that the truth is threatening to the beast system, right? So there are attempts to limit our reach. One way you can help us is to keep sharing the videos and by hitting the like button if the messages are a blessing. Those things help believe it or not, they actually help with the algorithm. So now would be a good time to hit the like button, by the way. But again, welcome to all of you. Let's get into this. We're continuing the discussion about these weird creatures on ancient maps. And there are some things I'm going to share with you tonight. When I was reading the key to the maps, it's like, why didn't they mention this? Why didn't they mention that? Because the things are right there. The cartographers put it there for us to see. So hopefully you had a chance to listen to the last two uploads, because I will be picking up where I left off. We want to uncover the truth about the maps. What are they hiding? What are they hiding? So I don't believe that it's by chance that old maps often portray hideous monsters in various regions of the known world. Even in Egypt, family, don't get it twisted. We know that some of those pharaohs with the elongated head, there was something strange about them. But we are told that these sea monsters are just myths and artistic decorations on the maps. Are you buying that? Because I'm not. I don't. So we're going to keep digging to see if there could be more to the story. We're going to uncover the truth about these supposedly mythological creatures on these ancient maps and find out some things that I guess they thought it was hidden, because some of these maps are a bit old, but the information is there in plain sight. I mean, it is there in plain sight. So, in the last session, I talked about this 16th century Carta Marina by Olaus Magnus, and it's a very large map. There's a lot to see on this map. So what I'm going to do in this session is focus on sections at a time. And just FYI, I normally post the links to content used right at the bottom of the slide for those who want to go back and read the entire articles. Some of these, I should say, are subscription based, so you may not be able to access all of them. But for the most part, you should be able to go back and pull up these things. So let's begin by finding out a little more about Olaus Magnus. He was a Swedish priest and scholar, and he published his map of the northern countries, the Carta Marina. He published it in Venice in 1539. Magnus assured his readers that everything he described was true and seen with his own eyes, and experienced and researched by himself. This is what he said. So many describe his illustrations as fanciful, like, this isn't really something that we can say this is really the truth. He's really embellishing here. But he's saying, no, I saw these things. And when I show some of these things, I think you're going to agree that it really ties into the lessons we did a while back on the giants, certain things that we saw in certain regions of the world, the Neander, you know what I'm talking about, things that they don't necessarily want to talk about. But you will find a lot of the same descriptions on maps by other cartographers. For example, this map right here is by a man named Jacob Ziegler from 1532. Now, I want you to look at this. I'm going to enlarge this a bit. I want you to look at where I have the red arrow pointing. What do you see here in the bottom left corner? Tell me what it looks like to you. Put that in the chat. Just tell me what you think that is. And I'll look at a few comments. What is that? Actually, you know what? I'm going to show it because I I enlarged it on the next slide. Look at the bottom left corner. What does that look like to you? Several of you are saying a dragon. Well, why was he putting that on the map? I mean, just think about it. Why is he telling us this is what I saw? It's a dragon. So, you all, I immediately thought of a dragon when I saw that. I also want you to look at something else on this map that we're going to talk about. Do you see where I have the red arrow? Hyperborea. Are you all familiar with Hyperborea? Because we're really going to talk about that. We're actually going to touch on it tonight, and we will really get into that in the next video. But keep that name in mind, Hyperborea, because I'm telling you some things that are happening right now. It's directly tying into this place, particularly this region near Greenland, or, this attempt now that they want to take over Greenland. So, for those who have not heard about Hyperborea, it is said that it's a mythical land. And I'm beginning to think that mythology is code for forbidden topics. But as you can see from this Ancient Origins article, it is believed that it was located near Atlantis. And remember, we talked about Thule. Some of you may pronounce it Thule. We talked about that in the first session. And we also talked about Scythia. But apparently, a lot of the ancient writers, to include Herodotus, talked about Hyperborea. So this says Hyperborea is mentioned repeatedly by Herodotus. Now let's remember that he is known as the father of European history. They believed him about other things, but on this one, they want to say, oh, it's just a myth. It is said that this place was home to a one-eyed race of people called the Arimaspians, whatever that is. And beyond them, there is the land of gold guarding griffins. And beyond them, the Hyperboreans. And they go all the way to the sea. Now, Herodotus wasn't the only one. Pliny the Elder, Pindar, Pausanias, Diodorus, Ovid, and Strabo also wrote about Hyperborea. Now, this says the large amount of work written about Hyperborea by these ancient authors show that there was a great fascination with this land. As a matter of fact, this fascination has survived until this day, as some have sought to identify the location of Hyperborea, which may help to prove its existence. Well, who exactly are they talking about? What's so significant about this place and these people? Now, according to this article from Ancient Code, Hyperborea was Atlantis's rival. It was the land to the north and the home place of the gods. Home place of the gods. It is in Greek mythology where we find a lot of details about this mythical land. According to Greek literature, Hyperborea was a place inhabited by a race of giants who were described as living in a place beyond the north wind. Now, hopefully you have a better understanding of north and where it is. As I said in the last session, even when you believe in the flat earth theory, we still use, these directional points so that we know where things are. So I'm not discounting what Enoch and others, how they described this earth that we live on. I mean, we can see that there are some things that they wanted to to make us believe that things are not exactly what they are. But it just so happens that the map we're focusing on happens to be in this region, the region near Hyperborea. So we're going to talk about some things. Let's look at this entitled Mythical Thule. Again, there are various ways to pronounce this place: Thule, Thula, Thyle, um, Thelia, Tile, Tilla, Tilla, Tile, or Thailand. And it's in classic sources as a place, usually an island. The ancient European descriptions and maps located either in the far north. Remember where the far north is, those island countries that the Bible or scripture is talking about, often northern Britain or Scandinavia, or in the west and north, often Iceland or Greenland. Otherwise, it's Sarima in the Baltic Sea. Now, there's another name you have to be familiar with. It's called Ultima Thule. So, in medieval geographies, it denotes any distant place located beyond the borders of the known world. So, these people that scripture was talking about, who would ultimately come against our people and take us into captivity, at the time, they were living beyond the borders of the known world. And this is why scripture says you won't even be able to recognize or understand their language, because our people were not familiar with them. So I hope this makes sense. Now, let's look at some of the things found on the ancient maps in this area. Some of what many refer to as unbelievable images come from stories of Saint Brendan, a 6th century Irish missionary who, according to legend, traveled to Iceland. His name is associated with an island of the same name. So, I mean, when you look at this, it's like, well, we're familiar with a lot of these things. We've seen some of these things. These are easily identifiable. We wouldn't say, okay, that's just kind of weird right there. But look at this. It's supposed to be a seahorse. This is on the map. Look at the manes hanging down its neck like a horse. Now, it looks nothing like the seahorses we see today, the little tiny creatures. So, are we looking at a case of genetic drift where something happened to the genetic code to cause things to get smaller, like with the giants over time? Because there is no way the smaller version of this seahorse would have caused great hurt and scare to fishermen like it says here. Why would they be afraid of this little tiny thing? You see what I'm saying? No, they were seeing something else that was much, much bigger. Now, look at this. This is from Abraham Ortelius's map called Icelandia. Look at his map, and you can see the seahorse there where the arrow is pointing, and it's as big as these other animals here. So what happened with the seahorse? Something's going on here. Again, are we looking at a case of genetic drift where things got smaller over time? Now, we're also going to look at Olaus Magnus's Carta Marina of 1539. And I tried to use maps with the clearest images. But as you can see here, the size of what they called a seahorse, it was pretty big. And now we see a sea cow. A sea cow. Look at the thing in gray. It says they sometimes come out of the sea and feed on the land in groups. They have a small bag hanging by their nose, with the help of which they live in the water. If it is broken, they live all together on the land, accompanied by other cows. Now, that's a bit strange. They live in the water. Have you heard of anything like that? Let's look at this. Look at these things. A sea cow, here you see it, with horns. So, is this how they really looked before? Or are we looking at something else? Now, in the lower left corner, this is what we call a sea cow now. Well, what happened to the horns? And can that live on land? I mean, what's really happening here? Look at this thing, you all. What comes to mind when you look at this? I want to see what you all say, because something immediately came to mind when I saw this green looking thing. I want to see what you all think. What comes to mind when you look at this thing? Let's see what you're saying. A porcupine, iguana, a hedgehog, okay, a honey badger, a dinosaur. Well, when I saw it, I thought about Godzilla. I don't know why, but this thing just looked a bit like Godzilla to me. It's like, is this where they got that idea from? From these images that they found on these ancient maps. Now let's look at that, because look at Godzilla on the left, and then look at this thing. I mean, you don't see the tusk, but there are other things that look familiar to me. And of course, Godzilla is a lot bigger when we see it. But let's look at Olaus Magnus's information. This says he was not the first who filled the map with illustrations. The medieval Mappamundus and Borderlands were rich in pictures, but Olaus Magnus was the first to depict the relics of antiquity on the map. He told about runic writings, historical events, battles fought, etc. On the other hand, he also described the phenomena of his own time and everyday life, including people in their day-to-day chores. Keep that in mind, because we're going to look at something in a few minutes. Keep that in mind. He said he was describing people in their everyday life. So the content of the map was a mixture of ancient and new. So again, keep that in mind. It says he prepared his pictures during a long period of time. The greatest part of them was based on his own observations, and many of them were even drawn by himself. Some pictures can be traced to famous painters like Hans Holbein the Younger, and to well-known works like Orlando Fariso and this other guy here. But let's go on. I want to look at some things that were on his map, you all. This is his map right here. What do you see? What do you see? If he said these are things he was observing, how do you explain this? Look at the size of the man in the center compared to the people he's looking at. Clearly, he's a giant. Look at the size of his sword. The sword is taller than the people. And then look at this weird creature crouching down in front of him. What is that? What exactly is that? So Olaus is telling us, I observed giants living in this place. It's right there on the map. Look at this thing. Here's what it looks like in color. Now you see the giant near the top. It looks like he's holding some type of sign, but clearly he's a lot larger than those people near him. What is going on with that? How do we explain it? He said he observed these things. What year was this? 1539. So these giants coexisted with humans. They were coexisting. Look at this. He's right there in the general vicinity. And even scripture proves this to be true, you all. Let's look at this from 2 Samuel 21:15 through 22. When the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David and his servants with him went down and fought against the Philistines, and David grew faint. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, who was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. He thought he could kill David. So what was happening here? The Philistines came out against Israel, and David led his men into battle. But he had gotten up in age by this time, and one of the sons of a giant tried to take him out. Now, thankfully, I think his name is Abishai here. He came to David's rescue. And David's men basically told him, no, you cannot come out to fight with us anymore, lest you quench or put out the lamp of Israel. We certainly know that David handled his business in his younger days, but he was no longer a spring chicken. His agility and strength weren't what it used to be. It was time to leave the fighting to the young whippersnappers. Now, thankfully, he wasn't so full of pride that he couldn't hear them. Let's go on. It says in verse 18, now it happened afterward that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite killed Saph, who was one of the sons of the giant. Again, there was war at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Origim, who are these names? The Bethlehemite killed the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. This thing was so big. Yet again, there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. And he also was born to the giant. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So look, you all, we cannot pretend that scripture wasn't telling us that these giants were living in close proximity to these people. They were living in their community. Not all of them were hiding out in caves. We can clearly see here, our people had to deal with these giants. Now, again, remember Olaus's map, 1500s. So, no, it's not a stretch to believe that he saw giants coexisting with humans. What's hard for many to believe is that it was after Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Pause and think on that. He was still seeing giants. Let's go on. Now, based on the map key of the Carta Marina map, this giant's name is Starcad. It says he was either an 8-armed giant or the human grandson of another giant. Starcad is mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf, for those who are familiar with that story. But here you can clearly see Olaus's map where this giant is right there. Let's look at this information from ancient pages. It calls him Starcad the Viking. He was a legendary Norse hero who is said to have been blessed and cursed by the gods. Again, it talks about him having more than 2 arms. It actually says he had 6 to 8 arms. What the heck is that? This says he was of half giant descent. So if these things were in their writings in the 15th century, why are they now pretending that these things don't exist? It was in their writings on the map. Now, this one is going to leave you scratching your head. Look at where I have the red arrow. What exactly is that, family? Let me see what you all say first. And then I'll tell you what I think it is. What is that? The red creature. What do you think that is? Somebody says marine spirits. Let's see. A satyr, okay. Giant Elmo, Satan's dwelling, a demon, Baphomet, a devil, a big rooster, big rooster, Latanya, Bigfoot, a fallen angel. Well, the first thing I thought of when I saw it was that it was a troll. I just thought that's a troll right there. Obviously, it's very tall. Look at its height compared to the homes in the area. But also, it seems like it lives underground. Look at that. It's not in one of the regular homes or near a regular house. It seems like this thing lives underground. Listen to this information from Seek Scandinavia. It says giants in Norse mythology, the ultimate guide to the Jotun or Jotnar. What does Jotun mean? While giant is the easiest translation of Jotun, and many of them were much larger than humans, the term also means something akin to org, troll, or monster, due to the fact that not all Jotun in Norse mythology were actually gigantic. So, English speakers frequently would write the name of the giant species as Jotun to avoid using the diacritical marks and to slightly cut down the number of characters without a loss of meaning. So they just kind of labeled everything giant. But there were trolls, for those of you who listened to that session we did, I want to say last year, about the trolls. These things existed. It goes on to say the giants of Norse mythology are called Jotun or the Jotnar. Some were large, but all possessed some form of immense physical or mystical power that rivaled or surpassed the gods of the Norse pantheon. They represented both natural and mystical forces compared to the Aesir representing characteristics of mankind. Now just think about Superman and these other um, heroes. They all have some type of special power, but also they are not of this earth. They've been telling us that. They have been telling us that. Now, it says that though it was often the Father's attributes that determined how the divinities were sorted in hybrid situations, the Norse pantheon was directly related to the giants. Odin and Loki, two of the most famous Norse gods, were both half Jotun. Loki's father was the Jotun Farbauti, and Odin's mother was the Jotun Besla. Is this not proving Genesis 6, you all, and what we read about in the book of Enoch? They were hybrid beings. They came about because of these fallen who had supernatural powers mating with the daughters of men. So we have various references telling us that after the giants were born to the fallen, after they mated with the women, men started worshiping these giants as gods because they had supernatural abilities and knowledge. All of these gods and goddesses came from somewhere. All of this was not a myth. Now, just to note here, I do read Enoch 1. I don't ascribe to books 2 and 3. There are just some major flaws in those two. And you're welcome to do your own research on that. But I do read Enoch 1. All right, let's keep going because there is a lot that we need to pay attention to on these old maps. Let's take a look at this creature. Do you think this thing can do some damage to this nearby ship? Well, apparently so. So obviously the people who were living in this region were experiencing frequent attacks, and it forced the cartographers to depict it on these maps. Now, have you ever seen something that looks like this? What is that? Now, a narwhal comes close to this. The adults measure about 9 to 18 feet, and they can weigh between 800 to 1,600 pounds. But do they look the same to you? And supposedly narwhals are not very aggressive to humans. So what is this? These things here look very dangerous. It says they are monstrous fish on the coast of, or sea of Norway. And they had unusual names. Now they say, well, these are just whales. But it says they show their cruelty at first sight. That they can be cruel. It says their forms are horrible. Their heads square. Well, this narwhal that we see here, it doesn't have a square head, I don't think. And the head doesn't have prickles all over it. It says they have short, sharp and long horns round about. Look at this. One of these sea monsters will drown easily many great ships provided with many strong mariners. They don't look the same to me. They do not look the same. Now, what is that? Apparently, it's called the whirlpool or prister. It's supposed to be a kind of whale that's 300 feet long, and just FYI, 108 feet is the longest on record when you're talking about whales. But he's saying these things are 300 feet long. It says this particular whale is very cruel. Supposedly, it sucks in water and then it raises itself beyond the sails and it will cast floods of water above its head at the ship to sink even the strongest ships. Now, there are other strange creatures depicted, like the sea beast called the unicorn on the left, and it says it destroys ships with its horn. But I want to focus on the sea creature here called this whirlpool for a few minutes. This prister. I mean, indeed strange to me. Look at this thing. What do you see on the bottom right of this map? What does it remind you of? Bottom right. The first thing that came to mind when I saw it was a portal. That's what I thought of. Now, the caption here says that what's happening is that another priester is attacking a Danish ship near Norway. And you see that it gives another name for the sea monster. It's called a Charybdis. So what's that? Well, it's a whirlpool. So now that's not making a lot of sense. It's saying the whirlpool is an actual monster called the Charybdis. They saw these whirlpools or pristers. And if you look this up, you'll find that one of the largest whirlpools or maelstrom can be found in this area. Cartographers felt compelled to add them to their map because this thing was so dangerous. Now here we see a sea serpent. It says, they who in works of navigation on the coast of Norway employ themselves in fishing or merchandise do all agree in this strange story that there is a serpent there which is of vast magnitude, namely 200 foot, a 200-footer, and more, over 20 feet, meters thick, and is wont to live in rocks and caves towards the sea coast about Burge, which will go alone from his holes in a clear night in summer and devour calves, lambs, and hogs. Or else he goes into the sea to feed on polypus, locusts, and all sorts of she crabs. It says he has commonly hair hanging from his neck, 18 inches long, hair hanging from its neck, sharp scales, and is black, and he has flaming, shining eyes. The snake disquiets the shippers, and he puts up his head on high like a pillar and catches away men and devours them. You all, what is this? I mean, this is sounding like Quetzalcoatl, don't you think? It has sharp scales and is black, has a beard. That's what it's sounding like to me. But according to Olaus, he's saying he witnessed these things. This is what he saw. Now, here you see some of the islands in that area. It says Orkney is depicted with Shetland to the east, Faroes Island, and a lot of these places are no longer on the modern maps. So Faroes Island to the northeast, and the island of Thule or Tile, the semi-mythical Ultima Thule of the Greeks and Romans. This island is said to lie to the far north. It has been claimed by Shetland and Iceland, but it was probably just a metaphor for a far distant land. Now, even if that's all it was, wouldn't it have a name? You know, what was it called? It was a far distant land in the far north, but what was it called? Here's another look at the distant land mass named Tile, again Thule, and we can certainly see a weird looking sea monster in the area. Now let's just focus on this island that was referred to as Ultima Thule for a bit. Let's focus on that. This comes from Geography Realm. It says, what does Ultima Thule mean? So what does Ultima Thule mean? Ultima Thule is Latin and has been used over the centuries to refer to an area of the world that is the most distant and inaccessible. In other words, as NASA describes, it's a place beyond the known world. The term was originally used in ancient Greek and Roman literature and cartography to denote a mythical island in the area furthest north. In classical and medieval cartography and literature, this term took on the meaning of any place beyond the known world at the time. So, Thule or Thule meant a place where no ships can sail. Again, different variations on how you say it or spell it. But this astronomy and geography manuscript from the mid-11th to 12th century shows a map of the world. And in the lower right corner, it's showing that island. You can clearly see it on the map. So why did they remove it? Why is it no longer acceptable to talk about some of the things that they were seeing in that area? Look at this. Just look at it. Now, the map is not very clear, but this is how Thule was depicted in the 11th century. It was called Thule Insula. Let's go on. We're going to look at this information from Ancient Origins, and it's entitled The Thule Culture, Medieval Mariners Migrating in Search of Meteoritic Iron. So let's see what we can find out from this article. Now, it says the modern English word Thule first appeared in ancient Greek and Roman cartographic documents as the Latin word Thule, describing farthest north location in the known world. Over the centuries, historians and archaeologists have variably concluded that word represented northern Scotland, Orkney, or Shetland. But according to some researchers, even the island of Saaremaa in Estonia and the Norwegian island of Smola have been suggested. So now they're basically saying they don't really know which island was referred to as Thule. They just know it was in that area. Now, it says the meaning of the original Greco-Roman word Thule had evolved by the late Middle Ages and early modern period when it was used to identify Iceland, and Ultima Thule generally referred to Greenland. This is basically the consensus that it was talking about Greenland, or a strong second would be Iceland. By the late 19th century, Thule was commonly identified as Norway. In 1910, it talks about this explorer who became the first European to cross the Northwest Passage with a dog sled, and he named the missionary and trading post he established in northwestern Greenland Thule. It was later changed to Quanag. So in modern history, German occultists believe that the historical Thule is Hyperborea, that it was the land from which the Aryan race originated. And the Thule Society was associated with this Dutch Arbelter Partel, DAP, later known as what party? Yeah, Adolf's crew. Make sure you catch that. We're really going to dig into this. They believe, these German occultists believe, that the historical Thule or Thule is really Hyperborea. Mm. And it was the land from which the Aryan race originated. Pause and think on that. They originated in the far north. Now, in case you didn't know it, NASA says that it has found a new kind of world. NASA's New Horizon mission reveals entirely new kind of worlds. It says scientists from NASA's New Horizon mission released the first detailed image of the most distant object ever explored, the Kuiper Belt object, nicknamed Ultima Thule, and later officially named Arrokoth. They say it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. So New Horizons is like a time machine, taking us back to the birth of the solar system. It says we are seeing a physical representation of the beginning of planetary formation frozen in time. New Horizons geology and geophysics team, or this is according to this New Horizons geology and geophysics team. So it says studying Ultima Thule is helping us understand how planets form, both those in our own solar system and those orbiting other stars in our galaxy. So this is supposedly what this thing looked like. It flew by the object in January of 2019. And they call this thing, they gave it the name Ultima Thule. Now, let's look at this from the Ish Telegraphic Agency. They pointed out that Ultima Thule, NASA's name for a distant object, was a term used by the infamous German group I talked about earlier, Adolf's folks. They claim, the Ish, that the forerunners of the party still uses this name, that their extreme right groups use this name. Did you know that? Ultima Thule. The party uses this name. Well, I wonder why. So it says the New Horizons spacecraft flew by the image that I just showed you, and they say it's the most distant object ever explored. So they're tying it in with this land on Earth that they're saying it's the most distant far north area, and they named it Ultima Thule. Now, Ultima Thule, this name was supposedly nominated by 40 people. It won the public poll, and it comes from classical and medieval literature and means any distant place located beyond the borders of the known world. Well, the author says, well, NASA apparently did not realize that Ultima Thule, pronounced Thule, was a term used by the forerunners of the Nazi Party and is still used by some extreme right groups as part of their own mythology. Now, of course they did. Who are they kidding? NASA was largely built by Operation Paperclip scientists, for those who are familiar with that. They knew exactly what the term means. So I'm laying the groundwork for the next video here, because we're going to be talking about the Thule Society, and all of these things tie into it. Now, family, it says, in Germany, extreme right occultists believed in a historical Thule, or Thule, also called Hyperborea, as the ancient homeland of the Aryan race. Again, where are they thinking this is? In Greenland or near Greenland and Iceland. So it says the Thule Society, founded in 1918, and that's significant. Around this and other occultist beliefs later became this party, Hitler's group. So, Mark Showalter, a planetary astronomer at the SETI Institute and investigator on the New Horizons mission, who led the naming contest, told Newsweek that Ultima Thule has a long history and that Nazism is not the first thing that people associate with the term. But he says he had never heard of this term until the naming contest. I don't know. But it's interesting that the Nazis kind of lay claim to this term. That it's identified now with any place that's going beyond the limits of the known world. And what comes to mind is Obadiah 1:4, where it's talking about Esau. Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, says the Most High. Esau wants to make his home in the stars. He wants to fly high. But what is his ultimate end? Well, when you continue reading, verse 10 says he will be cut off forever. He will be cut off forever. So again, I'm laying the groundwork here because we're really going to dig into Hyperborea. If you all are not familiar with this place and this Thule society, yeah, there are some weird things we need to know. I don't think it's a coincidence, that they now need to take control over Greenland. I believe there's a method to their madness. All of these things are tying together, and we need to understand certain things. Now, of course, they'll deny it, but no, it's not a coincidence that these cartographers were depicting these things on these ancient maps and telling us what they were seeing. These dragons, these giants, and again, what looked to me like a troll, living underground. They were telling us, yeah, these things are here. They're coexisting with the people living in that area. They're coexisting. So let's see what some of you are saying. Short and sweet, because again, I'll dig more into that when we do the next upload, but I needed you to have that information, that general information about these things we're seeing or they were seeing on those maps, and then you'll understand how these things tie in together. So I'm going to scroll back up and see where we are. Let's see. Oh, yeah, someone mentioned the plumed serpent. Who was that? I thought I just saw it. Just lost it. Okay. But yeah, that's what I thought of when it started talking about that thing. And we know scripture talks about Leviathan, particularly its scales, that thing was ferocious. It was deadly. So were they seeing some of those things? And I mean, when you consider the fact that the majority of the ocean floors have not been explored, who knows what's living down in those things? Who knows what's down there? They can only go so far down. But we are seeing a lot of weird things washing up on shores here lately. So yeah, we're looking at something. Let's see. Dwight says, are any of you old enough to remember the wrestler Laundry the Giant? I'm not familiar with that one. I didn't get into wrestling that much, though. All right, let's see. Praying for an Elisha says, these people have relics and woven pictographs of these things. I've seen them. Funny, just thought they were a great-grandmother's whimsical hand-woven heirloom. Yeah, that's what they're telling us. They want us to believe that. But no, no, they were seeing some things that caused them to be very frightened, and those things were dangerous. Shamika says, didn't the Scorpion King from the movie have more than two arms? I don't know. I have not seen that movie, but that's interesting. That's interesting. Let's see. David is talking about Middle Earth, like in Lord of the Rings. And there's a reason they keep showing that in the Goliath movies, King Kong movies. Why all of a sudden this interest in inner Earth? We need to talk about that. Shaya, they made a point to record it on the map, so it must be something of significance. Yeah, I don't believe it was just fairy tale. I don't believe it was just a fairy tale. Miss Jones says, now this makes sense. Uh-huh. Michael says, yep, they are underground and coming up soon. Just think about what's supposed to be coming out of the Euphrates River. Well, where is it now? You know what I'm saying? There are going to be some weird looking things coming up. I do believe that there are some things living underground. I do believe that. Let's see. Byron says, ungrateful giants. Feed them, and when they grow up, looks at the parents as their next meal. Oh, my goodness. Miss Jones, the queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Well, they definitely don't want to hear truth. They don't want to hear this. Inquisitor is talking about they were dwarves living in caves before Prometheus mixed in his seed. Golden Leopard said it's actually pronounced Yotan. Okay, Yotan instead of Jotan. All right. Let's see. Nike Gata, I've seen the fire scroll. Some of these creatures are guardians, genetic hybrids, but are righteous to guard treasure and ley lines. And then Inquisitor, the devil makes his home in the sides of the north. That's what it says. That's what it says. Caleb says, could they not all be grouped together and be called demons? Oh, yeah. But remember, if you read the book of Enoch, where it talks about where those demons came from, it tells us that when those giants died, they basically, a lot of them killed each other off. They had nowhere to go. They didn't belong in the heavens, and they didn't really belong here on earth. So their bodies died, but it says their spirits are roaming as demons. So, good evening to you too, Desreen. Yes, Thanos. Notorious Hebrews talking about Legion of Doom. Yeah, I don't know what that is either. I don't watch a lot of those types of movies. Peekaboo says, I remember my grandmother talking about circuses that had freak shows. Yes. People look strange or very tall. 1886. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Shaya says Superman came from some ice world too. Let's see. Antediluvian giants. All right, Bantu says their power comes from the wicked one who resides to the north. James, yeah, there's a reason they, Smithsonian go in and hide things. He says, I think they're still around, but just hidden by the powers that shouldn't be. Yeah, because then people start putting two and two together, and they can see the scripture is true. Stanley says so-called aliens are nothing. That's exactly what they are. But they're going to present these things as gods the same way they did back then. The same way they did back then. How you doing, Brother Charles? He says, sons of gods and the daughters of men. Let's see. I do believe that, Notorious Hebrew. Everyone you think of as human, they're not. Yeah. We need to be praying for discernment in these last days. Yeah. Mm-mm. There are some strange beings that they're going to be introducing. D-Max says this lesson rings like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's peculiar how Hollywood reveals truth as entertainment, isn't it? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know. Are they trying to get people to the point where they're familiar with these things so that it won't be such a shock? I don't know. I don't know. But we know that our people were given an assignment. Israel was told to get rid of those things. I mean, they were not told to go all over the earth to get rid of them, but in the land, in the promised land, they were told to wipe them out. And that's why the Most High did not want them mixing with them. But a lot of our people were hard-headed. Let's see. Pull up a few more. Let's see. Saw says, reminds me of that Norwegian movie on Netflix called Troll. Yeah, I just saw that again the other day, actually. And yeah, I think they're letting bits of truth out. I do. I just do. How are you, Sister Carr? Blessings to you. Yeah, I just think they're letting some things out. Andrew says, considering that only 5 to 10% of the ocean has been discovered, I believe a lot of things on those maps are still out there. Yeah, I do. I do. Shaya says the thing that all those sea monsters have in common is that they were enormous. That has fallen written all over it. Exactly. And when you think about the giants, they had to create food big enough for them to eat. Some of them were massive. And they couldn't, when you read the book of Enoch, it says they couldn't sustain them. They were eating all the food. So they had to create things big enough for them to eat. All right, let's go on. Lisette says, I can't see Adam petting these creatures. Well, I can't either. I can't either. Oh, now I know what you're talking about, Dwight. Yeah, Andre the Giant. Yes, I do remember him. I do remember him. So I guess I'm old enough to remember. B. Smith says, I used to spend hours as a kid looking at these types of images on maps, and I've always wondered why they were there and if they were real. Yes, Sister Alma, there are some interesting stories about the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, they have these things on record that things just come out missing in that area. Well, why? Why? Portal, or what is it? What is it? You know? Yeah, Saint is talking about the Loch Ness Monster. Leviathan, yes. Yeah, I do believe they're coming from the deep, Saw. Let's see. Brother Charles, I don't know if that's what swallowed up Jonah, but based on Olaus's description, what they were witnessing, those things were dangerous. And I don't think, well, I don't know, we don't know that Most High could have spoken to one of it to protect Jonah. Let's see. Yeah, Crystal, what's crazy is that they name all these Fortune 500 companies after these evil things. Why is that? Why is that? Caleb, yes, the Kraken. Some people were saying that it was the Kraken. And I mean, it's on, they're saying that exists. It existed. So, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Sister Alma, we definitely need protection from dangers, seen and unseen, for sure. Ron Spicy Jamaican says, listening to this is bringing back all the stories told to me as a child and all the movies I saw. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bantus is replying, that's where they get their wealth once they sell their souls and sign them contracts in blood. It's all the pact they made. But yeah, there are some interesting things going on in Antarctica. And we're going to talk about some of those things. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence that there's this sudden interest in that area, particularly when you look at the things that were happening in World War One, World War Two. Yeah, it's suspect, is what I say. It's suspect. So we'll talk more about it. Listen. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Dexter, he said he had friends when he was in the Air Force, were stationed at Thule Air Force Base. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. All right. Well, family, we're going to go ahead and wrap that up. As I said, short and sweet, because this is laying the foundation for the next video. We need to know about Hyperborea. We need to know about Hyperborea. So remember to go ahead and hit the like button if you have not already done so. Yes, Harvest, I read about that too, because you notice that the sightings really increase after World War One, World War Two. What's that all about? What is that all about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jason and the Argonauts, a lot of these creatures. Yeah. It's no coincidence. It's no coincidence. All right. So again, family, thanks so much for joining me for this session. We're going to pick up here next time. If you have not listened to part 1 and 2, you really need to go back and listen to those, because again, those 2 messages and this one tonight is kind of laying the groundwork for what we're going to talk about next. And some of it is a bit far-fetched. It's a bit far-fetched, but we're going to cover it. We're going to talk about it. And then, you make up your own mind. You make up your own mind. But scripture, particularly the book of Revelation, is talking about some of these strange creatures that's going to be appearing in the last days. These locusts with hair like women and faces like men. Where are these things coming from? It says it's coming from the bottomless pit, so inside the earth. I think there are things that are there. So, all right, family, peace and blessings to all of you. Join me next time.